Hello everyone, this is the forecast for the full moon and partial lunar eclipse in Taurus and the lunar mansion Kṛttikā. So although a partial lunar eclipse, it's actually almost full, and we can really look at it as a full eclipse. The moon, it doesn't have a light of its own. It's not like the sun. When the sun is not 100% eclipsed, you know that very clearly. When the moon is not 100% eclipsed, you don't really know it because it's the whole of the moon really looks like it's eclipsed basically. So it's pretty much it. You can think of it as a full total lunar eclipse. But what's more striking about this particular lunar eclipse is how long it is. So this is actually the longest lunar eclipse in duration since 1212, so 800 years ago. So that was the last time we had one this long. And the reason is because we have these what are called supermoons and micromoons, and a supermoon is when it's closer to the earth, and a micromoon is when it's further, because the path of the moon is not a perfect circle. So when it's further away and it's a micromoon, as it is for this eclipse, it means that it's going to last longer. So it actually, if we take universal time, it begins 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, November 19th, and it lasts until 12 p.m. So it's quite a long one. Again, the longest one in 800 years. So it's quite intense for that reason, even though it's not a super moon. And it's also very intense because it's an exalted moon and it's conjunct Rahu. However, there definitely are some mitigating factors because it's in its favorite sign, and it subsequently moves into its favorite lunar mansion, Rohini, the day after. So, there are many good things about this full moon, but there are many distortions as well, because Moon Rahu is a very challenging and complex configuration in any chart, whether it's in your birth chart or in the transits. Rahu Moon is called a Shakti Yoga in Indian astrology. So Shakti means energy. It's like the feminine energy. But energy is energy. Like whether it's good energy or bad energy, whatever you wish to label it, it's very much dependent on Rahu itself and how it's associating with planets, and especially in this case, how Venus is doing, because Venus rules Taurus. Some astrologers actually say that the moon also rules Taurus, but that's an aside. Moon is most definitely at home in Taurus, whatever way you want to look at it. It's exalted at 3 degrees where this eclipse occurs, sidereal Taurus, by the way, and it is in what is called root strength for all of the rest of the sign. So from 3 degrees to the end of Taurus. Some say 3 degrees to 20 degrees, some say to 30 degrees of Taurus. Either way, we're looking at moon in Taurus as being right at home, feeling good, everything's great, except for the fact that it's eclipsed and it's with Rahu, what it's most fearful of. And I guess, why is Rahu more fearful or for the moon than Ketu? It's not that Ketu isn't fearful for the moon, but Rahu is more so, because think of the Vedic myth of Rahu Ketu, and Rahu being all our fears. Like, where do we feel our fear? Well, we can feel it in our body for sure, but where does the fear originate? It's in our mind. And that's why when you think about the Vedic myth of the demon having its head cut off and all of that, or the head of the serpent, all of this sense of being in your head, although again a good position for Rahu according to some being in Taurus, because Taurus is the most sensual sign of zodiac. So if you want to put all your desires somewhere, it's in sensual desire. At least it brings you into the moment. Like if you're having a sensual experience like sex, or you're eating something and it's pleasurable, you're experiencing it in the moment. You cannot experience it like yesterday or tomorrow. When you think about smelling something, really nice food or something, you can't remember smelling food that you had in the past. You could try, but it's really hard. I mean, I actually don't think that's possible. If you could just close your eyes and imagine smelling something from the past, you can try and remember what the smell is like, but you cannot grasp it really. To smell something, you have to smell it in the moment. So that's why Taurus and Rahu, is a good combination in many ways. But when Rahu and Moon both come together in Taurus, there's this overindulgence and overdoing it and distortion of the mind in some way. Because again, the Moon is fearful of Rahu. The devourer is like I want more, more, more. I'm not satisfied. It's not enough. So if you're having sex, it's just not enough. It's not satisfying. And the more sex you have, actually, the less satisfying it is. Same with food. So if you know anyone who's Taurus dominant, like rising sign, moon sign, or a lot of planets there, you'll know that they're very sensual, very tactile people, especially Taurus rising. They're very tactile. They're very sensitive to smells as well, I've noticed over the years. And so because it's Venus is all about sensitivity, and it's an earth sign, Taurus. It's dominant in earth, and earth relates to smell. You know, literally when you're smelling, you are inhaling particles up your nose. So it's corresponding to the earth element. So of course, if something smells good, that's great. But if it doesn't smell good, if it's offensive, that's really offensive and disturbing to Venus sensitivities. So Taurians are very sensitive to anything that's vulgar or offensive or ugly in any way. Whether it's a behavior, whether it's an image, whether it's a smell or a touch, that's, you know, whatever it is, it's like they're very sensitive and very sensual. So of course, I'm telling you all of this because I'm trying to relate that Rahu can distort things. And although an initial experience, an enjoyable experience, might have been just that, might have been enjoyable, and might have taken you into your senses, and that literally, that phrase, coming back to your senses, you know, it might taken you out of the mind where you're projecting your mind into the future in all kind of fearful ways, and have taken you back into a nice meal, sitting down with good company and a nice meal, an enjoyable situation. That's all great. But it's then when you overindulge and you eat too much and then you drink too much and then you have too much sex, it all sounds great. But of course, you know, if you do any of those things, it doesn't feel great afterwards. And this is the issue with Rahu Moon combinations. It's always excessive. So it can be excessively good as well, but when it's bad, it's really bad. This is the thing to know with Rahu. And Rahu is all or nothing all the time. So it's never in the middle. It's never balanced. It always wants whatever it wants to such a degree where it creates such an extreme, and therefore then has to counterbalance with another extreme. So you might be familiar with this concept in the brain, literally how our dopamine receptors react to stimulus, how whatever we're enjoying, at some point when we go too far with it, it starts tipping the balance from pleasure to pain. So, and you can do this experiment for yourself, if you will, if you want. I wouldn't do it for this eclipse in particular, but you can do it and I'm sure you have done it. So basically, you just eat something you really enjoy and you keep eating it until you get sick. That's quite an obvious example. But anything that you can think of that you really enjoy, if you do it too much, it starts getting painful. And then not only that, but worse still, your dopamine receptors get like numb to that enjoyment. And actually, next time you go back to it, it's just not as enjoyable. And you just need more of it, and it just more and more. And there's, of course, you can only take so much of sensual pleasure, and it starts wreaking havoc. Now, how this is playing out in the world is the most obvious way in supply chains and famines around the world, and all these kinds of major issues that Rahu blows up and out with it being in Taurus. So that's a huge thing. But in terms of personally for yourself, noticing, you know, the need to find sensual gratification, but also to find balance during this full moon, I would say. So especially tomorrow. Now it is here where I am in the morning, but it might be later on in the day for you, or it might be early in the morning during the night for you, depending on where you are in the world. But tomorrow, just notice, and leading up to tomorrow, because we're now in the full moon phase. The moon is now transiting Aries in the lunar mansion Barony, and then tomorrow it will go into Kṛttikā, that lunar mansion that bridges Aries and Taurus. Now, Kṛttikā is an interesting one because it's one of only two lunar mansions that are mixed in quality. So it's seen as both sharp and soft. The previous lunar mansion Barony is fierce. So there's a fierceness about Aries, and there's a sharpness about Aries too. But in Taurus then, it's both sharp and soft. You think about Taurians who have, this kind of very tactile approach to life and very constructive people. They're good at building things, and building things that are there to enjoy. When you think about things that we enjoy, when you think about cars and houses and food and all of these things, and community and family, all of these things are Taurus. So it's about building communities, about building houses, about building luxury and all of these comforts, and having all of these comforts around us. So Kṛttikā involvement in that is about the actual building. To actually build anything, you need to kind of cut wood up and chop wood up and build, right? But in terms of anything that we create in our lives, there's a process we have to go through to cut things out. Because if you want to create anything, a lot of the time it's about what we actually need to cut out of the equation to make that happen. And in terms of mentally and emotionally and well-being, Kṛttikā is as much about what we need to remove from our minds than it is what we need to put into our minds. And so another thing I would say about this full moon, and in general, is look at the kind of sensory experiences that you're having, that you're feeding yourself, because we often just think about food as the only thing that feeds us, but everything feeds us. Visuals feed us. Auditory things feed us, like listening to music, nice music. If you listen to like music that's very discordant, that's not a nice, pleasurable experience. Even if you personally like that kind of music, it's not. I mean, if you're constantly looking at images that are very disturbing, even if you are enjoying those images because you like disturbing images, like horror, that's one example, it's still disturbing your mental peace. And this is one of the things to know about Rahu. Rahu is like impish. It likes to disturb. It likes to disturb you. So think about, what are you feeding your mind through your senses? What mental stimuli are you giving yourself? What sensory stimuli? What are you visually looking at every day? What's in front of you every day? Are you feeding yourself nice visuals like nature scenes? And this is why people who don't have access to nature, for example, it's helpful to actually have some nice images around, and plants and things that bring you back into that kind of more sensual environment, water and things like that. What are you listening to? Who are you listening to? All of these things. Tastes, all of that. Touch, all of these things. Smells. Again, smells is a really important one for Taurus. So like, have you got some nice smells going on around you? Some burning some oils or whatever. Anyway, the point is that Rahu tends to distort. It exaggerates but also distorts. And this kind of distortion for the mind and impishness for the mind can really be disturbing. So just notice what you're exposing yourself to for this full moon and eclipse, I would say. If you can do that, then you might be able to just kind of, step back a little bit and not jump in, head first into things that might not be wholesome. Let me put it that way. That might not be wholesome. So there's quite a few other things going on for this full moon that are quite intense. Let's face it, I'm going to use the word intense a lot, if I haven't already. And Mars is exactly opposite Uranus for this full moon. So that's alone enough to kind of trigger things. Venus itself is 8 signs away in Sagittarius, with Jupiter itself about to move signs into Aquarius. So it's teetering on the edge here of Capricorn and Aquarius. So that's also, there's an edginess basically about this full moon. There's absolutely an edginess about it. And again, Kṛttikā is that kind of edginess as well. Its symbol is a blade, so there's that kind of need to cut things out, but it's like being on an knife edge as well. It's ruled by Agni, the god of fire, a deity which is all about purification. So again, this is why the moon does so well here, moving into then Rohini, the following lunar mansion in Taurus, where it really feels like, okay, I've cut this thing out, I've stopped doing this. Your mind, your emotions, your being, and your well-being needs a certain amount of heat, of tapas, they call it in yoga, in order for you to transmutate, to transform, and to remove any impurities so that you can be mentally, emotionally well. And then with Rohini, then it's very much about enjoying that kind of stability for the mind, and again, sensual in experience and all of that is part of it, but it's not the only part. There's much more to it. It's just this sense of comfort for the mind, having removed what is very disturbing, basically. So whether it's a toxin, and again, that could be like mentally a toxin, a residue of an emotional or mental experience you cannot digest fully. You've had some experience and it just lingers. Again, I'll use the example of a horror movie. You watch a horror movie, and as much as you might enjoy it and it gives you a thrill, you actually haven't been able to fully digest it. And it just sits with you, and it creates this disturbance in your mental field. Now, what Kishori in our conversations recommends, for an example like this, watching a horror movie or watching a horror scene, you don't even have to watch horror movies these days, you just have to watch the news. So if you're watching something horrific, she suggests being completely open to that instead of contracting around it, because actually the contraction around it, which is what Rahu also suggests, the fear and contraction around it is just as bad as the thing itself and your experience of it, because if you're not being open to it, it's like holding it. It's like you're bringing this experience in and then you're contracting around it, and it's like holding on to it. Now I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm putting some words to it as well, but that's basically what Kishori recommends. It's just being open to it. And in Tantra as well, they also recommend this practice of and visualizing and the heart having a back door. So it's like if you have an experience that comes in, something that disturbs or could easily disturb, but you remain completely open and allowing this to come in and leave through the back door. You're not holding on to it. You're not holding it in your heart. This is a really important practice in general, and especially around Rahu type themes and this full moon and eclipse because of Rahu moon in Taurus. So that's one thing you could do as well for this full moon. And apart from that, I would just say, try to come into your senses, back to your senses, into the moment, whatever projections you have going on with your mind. If you're especially influenced by Rahu at this time, even if they're positive projections into the future, come back into your senses, come back into the moment, because the future is just going to create a lot of fear. And you might label it excitement, but it's very similar to fear. And it's just a case of labeling, right? But just come back into the moment for this full moon, I would say. And of course, I wish you all of the best for this full moon. And I'll record the next audio for the new moon, which is an important new moon in the opposite sign, Scorpio. And this is what we need to be very mindful of when I talk about Scorpio and the new moon and a total solar eclipse in Scorpio in 2 weeks' time. It's important to find balance between the signs also, and this is what full and new moons do. They balance all the signs, but all signs in a way are polarized. And the way Taurus becomes polarized opposite Scorpio is that we might overindulge our senses and enjoyments in order to avoid the Scorpio themes, the Scorpio issues, the problems in our life, the things we actually have to overcome. So we might kind of check out in a way by doing too much of the Taurus thing. So the new moon in a couple of weeks comes along and says, well, actually, no, we need to look at these things. And if we're going to be able to overcome them and get rid of them, Ketu is in Scorpio, it's about ridding ourselves of problems. We need to actually look at them. We need to see them for what they are as well. And this is what this upcoming solar eclipse is all about in Scorpio. So anyway, I'll talk more about that in a couple of weeks. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you get something from that. And until next time.